The morning Catherine Mitchell found the dying warrior by Willow Creek would change everything she thought she knew about honor, destiny, and the invisible threads that bind two worlds together. What began as a simple act of mercy would spiral into a revelation that would bring an entire Arapaho nation to her doorstep, carrying ancient customs and a proposal that would challenge everything she believed about her quiet frontier life. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The October wind carried an unusual chill across the Montana plains as Catherine Mitchell guided her paint mare along the familiar trail toward Willow Creek. The sun had barely crested the eastern ridgeline, casting long purple shadows across the golden grassland that stretched endlessly toward the distant Burrtooth Mountains. Catherine pulled her woolen shawl tighter around her shoulders, breathing in the crisp air that promised winter's early arrival. At 26, Catherine had grown accustomed to these solitary morning rides. Her late father's homestead sat 3 miles from the nearest neighbor, and these quiet hours before the day's responsibilities claimed her had become sacred time. The rhythmic clop of hooves on the worn earth and the gentle creak of leather provided a familiar soundtrack to her thoughts. As they approached the creek's bend, where cottonwoods formed a natural windbreak, her mare suddenly snorted and shied. Sideways, Catherine steadied herself in the saddle, speaking softly to calm the spooked animal. "Easy, Luna. What's got you worried?" The mare's ears swiveled forward, focused on something beyond the tree line. Catherine followed her gaze and felt her breath catch. Through the morning mist rising from the creek, she glimpsed what appeared to be a dark form sprawled motionless among the cattails at the water's edge. Dismounting quickly, Catherine tied Luna's reins to a sturdy cottonwood branch and pushed through the tall grass toward the creek bank. As she drew closer, the morning light revealed the unmistakable outline of a human figure lying face down in the shallow water, partially submerged and completely still. Her heart hammering, Catherine waded into the cold creek without hesitation. The figure was that of a tall, powerfully built man with long black hair that floated like dark silk in the gentle current. His buckskin clothing was torn and stained with what appeared to be dried blood, and a distinctive beaded medicine bag hung from his belt, clearly marking him as one of the Arapaho people who moved through these territories. Catherine had heard stories from traders and traveling merchants about the various tribes that called these vast plains home, but she had never encountered any of their people directly. The nearest settlement, Copper Ridge, was a full day's ride south, and her isolated homestead rarely saw visitors of any kind. Gripping the man's broad shoulders, Catherine managed to turn him over, revealing a face that was both striking and alarming. High cheekbones and strong features spoke of noble bearing, but his skin had taken on a grayish pallor that made her stomach clench with worry. A deep gash across his forehead had crusted over with dried blood, and his breathing was so shallow she had to place her ear close to his chest to detect the faint, irregular heartbeat. "Lord have mercy," she whispered, assessing the situation with the practical mind that frontier life had forged in her. This man was dying, and she was likely the only person within miles who could help him. Catherine had learned basic medical care from her mother before consumption claimed her life. 5 years earlier, living in isolation meant being prepared for any emergency, from treating injured livestock to setting broken bones. But this was different. This was a human life hanging by the thinnest thread, and every second of hesitation could mean the difference between life and death. The warrior was too heavy for her to lift alone, but Catherine refused to let that stop her. She waded back to shore and retrieved a thick wool blanket from her saddlebags, then returned to carefully wrap it around the unconscious man. Using the blanket as a makeshift stretcher, she managed to drag him from the water onto the soft grass of the creek bank. His clothing was soaked through, and in the cool morning air, hypothermia would claim him soon if she didn't act quickly. Catherine's mind raced through her options. Her homestead was only a mile away, but transporting him there would require careful planning. Luna was a sturdy mare, but carrying 2 riders, one of them unconscious, would be challenging. As she worked to examine his injuries more thoroughly, Catherine noticed details that spoke of this man's importance within his community. The beadwork on his clothing was intricate and beautiful, featuring patterns she didn't recognize, but could appreciate for their craftsmanship. Silver ornaments adorned his hair, and the knife at his belt bore engravings that suggested it was far from ordinary, but most striking was a distinctive necklace that lay across his chest, a stunning piece featuring a large turquoise stone, surrounded by eagle feathers and smaller stones in patterns that seemed to tell a story. Catherine had never seen anything like it, but something about the piece suggested it was more than mere decoration. It carried the weight of significance, like a family heirloom or symbol of rank. The warrior stirred slightly, a soft groan escaping his lips. His eyelids fluttered but didn't open, and Catherine could see his body trembling from cold and shock. She pressed her hand to his forehead and felt the burning heat of fever beginning to set in. "I know you can't understand me," she said softly, hoping her voice might somehow reach him in his unconscious state, "but I'm going to help you. I won't let you die here alone." Catherine made her decision. She would have to risk the journey back to her homestead with him. Her father's old travois, wooden frame designed for transporting supplies, was stored in the barn. If she could get the warrior onto Luna's back for the short ride home, she could then use the travois to move him more safely. Working with careful urgency, Catherine managed to position the wrapped warrior across Luna's back, keeping one steadying hand on him while leading the mare slowly homeward. Every few steps, she checked to ensure he was still breathing, her heart stopping each time his chest seemed to pause too long between breaths. The journey that usually took 15 minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Catherine found herself talking continuously, partly to keep the mare calm and partly because the sound of her own voice helped steady her nerves. "Almost there," she murmured as her log cabin came into view beyond the next rise. "My father built that house with his own hands back in '67. Solid as the mountains themselves. You'll be safe there." The homestead sprawled across a gentle valley where Willow Creek curved through meadowland that her father had carefully cultivated. The main house was a sturdy 2-story structure built from local timber, with a wide covered porch that faced the sunrise. A smaller barn and various outbuildings completed the homestead, all connected by well-worn paths that spoke of years of purposeful activity. Catherine's nearest neighbor, old Henrik Larson, lived 3 miles to the east with his grandson Tommy. Beyond that, the nearest settlement was Copper Ridge, where the weekly supply train stopped and where the territorial marshal maintained a small office. But all of that felt impossibly distant now, with a dying man depending entirely on her knowledge and determination. Once they reached the barn, Catherine quickly retrieved the travois and managed to transfer the warrior onto its padded surface. She hitched it to Luna and led them carefully to the house, where she faced her next challenge, getting a man who likely outweighed her by 80 pounds up the porch steps and into the warmth of her home. Catherine had always prided herself on her strength and independence, qualities that frontier life demanded of anyone who hoped to survive. But as she struggled to move the unconscious warrior, she felt the full weight of her isolation. There was no one to call for help, no neighbor within shouting distance, no doctor within a day's ride. She would have to be enough, using a combination of the travois, wooden planks as ramps, and sheer determination. Catherine managed to get the warrior inside and onto the bed in her father's old room on the ground floor. The effort left her breathless and sweating despite the cool air, but seeing him lying in the clean, warm bed gave her the first surge of hope she'd felt since finding him. Now came the real work. Catherine had watched her mother tend to injured trappers and travelers over the years, and she had treated her share of sick animals. But this was her first attempt at caring for someone so critically wounded. She began by carefully cutting away his wet clothing with her sharpest kitchen knife, revealing the full extent of his injuries. Besides the head wound, she found a deep puncture in his left shoulder that appeared to be from an arrow or spear point, and severe bruising across his ribs that suggested he'd taken a hard fall or been struck by something heavy. The head wound was her primary concern. It was deep enough to require stitching, and the fact that he remained unconscious suggested a serious concussion. Catherine cleaned the wound with whiskey from her father's emergency supply, then used silk thread and her mother's finest needle to close the gash with careful, even stitches. As she worked, she found herself studying the warrior's face. Even unconscious and pale from blood loss, there was something regal about his features. His was not the face of an ordinary man, but someone accustomed to command and respect. The silver ornaments in his hair were clearly markers of status, and the quality of his weapons and clothing spoke of wealth and position within his tribe. Catherine had heard stories from traders about the complex social structures of the plains. Tribes, how certain families held positions of leadership that passed from generation to generation. She wondered if she might be treating someone of genuine importance, perhaps even a chief's son. The shoulder wound proved more challenging. The projectile had gone completely through, which was fortunate, but the exit wound was jagged and would need careful cleaning to prevent infection. Catherine had learned from her mother that honey could help wounds heal, and she applied it liberally before binding the shoulder with clean linen strips. By the time she finished treating his visible injuries, the sun was high overhead, and Catherine realized she hadn't eaten since the previous evening. But she couldn't bring herself to leave the warrior's side for long. His breathing remained shallow and irregular, and she found herself counting each breath, willing his body to fight for life. She prepared a thin broth from beef stock and tried to get small amounts into him, holding his head carefully and letting the warm liquid trickle between his lips. Most of it ran down his chin, but she thought she saw his throat work slightly, suggesting some of the nourishment was getting through. As the afternoon wore on, Catherine established a routine of checking his wounds, changing damp cloths on his forehead to help with the fever, and attempting to get more broth into him. She spoke to him continuously, partly because she'd heard that unconscious people could sometimes hear voices, and partly because the sound of her own words helped combat the profound silence of the house. "I wonder what your name is," she said, during one of her vigils beside the bed. "I wonder if you have family who are looking for you right now, worried sick because you didn't come home." The thought troubled her. Somewhere, people who loved this man were probably wondering what had happened to him. Catherine had no way of contacting any Arapaho groups, no way of sending word that their missing member was safe. For all she knew, his disappearance might even lead to conflict if his people assumed he'd been harmed by whites. That evening, as Catherine lit the oil lamps against the gathering darkness, the warrior's breathing seemed to grow stronger. The fever that had racked his body throughout the day appeared to be breaking, and twice she thought she saw his eyelids flutter as if he might be struggling toward consciousness. She had pulled a chair close to the bed and was reading aloud from one of her father's books when she heard it, a soft sound that made her look up quickly. The warrior's lips had moved, forming what might have been a word in a language she didn't understand. Catherine leaned closer, placing her hand gently on his uninjured shoulder. "Can you hear me?" she asked softly. "You're safe. You're going to be all right." For a moment, his breathing seemed to synchronize with hers, as if her presence was somehow anchoring him to consciousness. Then his body relaxed again into the deep unconsciousness of healing, but Catherine felt a spark of hope that had been missing all day. He was going to live. She was sure of it now. As she settled in for what would likely be a long night of watching over him, Catherine couldn't shake the feeling that this moment, this choice to save a stranger's life, was going to change everything about her quiet, predictable existence. The hours passed slowly. Catherine dozed fitfully in the chair beside the bed, startling awake every time the warrior's breathing changed or he shifted in his sleep. Around midnight, she was jolted fully alert by a low murmur from the bed. The warrior was speaking, his voice barely above a whisper, but the words were in his native tongue and completely foreign to her ears. She leaned closer, hoping to catch something she might understand, but the soft syllables meant nothing to her. What struck her was the tone. Even in unconsciousness, there was an unmistakable authority in his voice, as if he were accustomed to being heard and obeyed. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Catherine whispered, placing a cool cloth on his forehead. Rest now. Whatever you're trying to say can wait until you're stronger. But the warrior continued to murmur intermittently throughout the night, sometimes seeming agitated, other times speaking with what sounded like tenderness. Catherine found herself wondering if he was dreaming of home, of family, of the circumstances that had brought him to that creek bank. Half-dead. Dawn was breaking when Catherine noticed the change. The warrior's breathing had steadied into the deeper rhythm of natural sleep rather than unconsciousness, and the grayish pallor had been replaced by a more normal coloring. When she checked his forehead, the fever had broken completely, leaving his skin cool and dry. She was refilling the water basin when she heard the creak of bedsprings behind her. Catherine turned to find the warrior's eyes open, dark and alert, studying her with an intensity that made her suddenly aware of how disheveled she must look after the long night. For a moment, neither of them moved. Catherine felt frozen under his gaze, uncertain whether he would see her as friend or enemy. She had heard enough stories about captured whites to know that not all encounters between their peoples ended peacefully. The warrior's eyes moved slowly around the room, taking in the rustic furniture, the oil lamp still burning on the table, the medical supplies scattered across the dresser. When his gaze returned to Catherine, she saw wariness but not hostility. Water? She offered, picking up the cup she had been trying to get him to drink from all night. He studied her face for a long moment, then gave an almost imperceptible nod. Catherine approached the bed carefully, supporting his head as she helped him. Take small sips. His throat worked painfully, suggesting he had been unconscious longer than she had realized. When he had drunk enough, he lay back against the pillows, his dark eyes never leaving her face. Catherine could practically see him trying to piece together how he had come to be in this place, in this condition. My name is Catherine, she said slowly, pointing to herself. Catherine Mitchell. You were injured by the creek. I brought you here to help you heal. The warrior's brow furrowed with concentration as he processed her words. When he spoke, his voice was hoarse, but his English, though accented, was surprisingly clear. How long? He asked. Catherine felt a surge of relief. That they could communicate. Since yesterday morning. You've been unconscious for nearly a full day. He tried to sit up, then grimaced and fell back as the movement pulled at his wounded shoulder. Catherine quickly moved to check the bandages, relieved to see that none of his stitches had pulled loose. You need to rest, she said firmly. Your injuries are serious. The head wound alone could have killed you. The warrior raised one hand to gingerly touch the stitches across his forehead, wincing at the contact. You did this? Catherine nodded. I've had some practice with medical care. Living out here, you learn to handle emergencies on your own. He was quiet for a long moment, studying her with what seemed like amazement. You saved my life. Anyone would have done the same, Catherine replied, though even as she said it, she wondered if that was true. Not everyone would have risked bringing an unknown Arapaho warrior into their home. No, he said quietly, his dark eyes serious. Not anyone. You chose to help when you could have walked away. Among my people, such a debt is not forgotten. There was something in his tone that made Catherine pause. It wasn't just gratitude. There was a weight to his words that suggested deeper meaning. "What's your name?" she asked. The warrior hesitated, as if deciding how much to reveal. "I am called Standing Wolf," he said finally. Catherine repeated the name, trying to pronounce it the way he had. "Standing Wolf, that's a strong name." A ghost of a smile crossed his features. "My grandmother chose it. She said I had the patience of a wolf watching its prey, but the courage to act when the moment was right." "Your grandmother sounds wise," Catherine said, settling back into her chair. "Do you remember what happened? How did you came to be injured?" Standing Wolf's expression darkened, and Catherine saw his jaw tighten with what looked like anger or frustration. "I was returning from a hunting expedition with 2 of my brothers. We had tracked a large elk herd for 3 days and were heading home when we encountered a group of white men." He paused, and Catherine could see him choosing his words carefully. They were not settlers or traders. These men were different, hard men with cruel faces and no honor in their hearts. They demanded we give them our horses and weapons. Catherine felt her stomach tighten. She had heard stories of such encounters, usually ending in violence. "My brothers wanted to fight," Standing Wolf continued, "but I counseled patience. We were outnumbered, and I hoped to negotiate. But when their leader saw He touched the ornate necklace at his throat, then seemed to think better of whatever he had been about to say. When he saw that we carried valuable things, he became greedy. What happened then? Fighting. I took an arrow to the shoulder and a blow to the head from a rifle stock. When I next knew anything, I was alone by the creek with my horse dead beside me." His voice grew heavy with grief. "I do not know the fate of my brothers." Catherine's heart ached for him. To wake up injured and alone, not knowing if your family was alive or dead, she couldn't imagine anything worse. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. "When you're stronger, perhaps we can find a way to get word to your people. Let them know you're alive." Standing Wolf looked at her with something that might have been surprise. "You would do this? Even knowing it might bring other Arapaho to your door?" The question caught Catherine off guard. She hadn't really considered the implications of what she was suggesting. But looking at this man's obvious pain over his missing brothers, she knew her answer. "Of course. If my family were missing, I would want someone to send word if they found me safe." Standing Wolf studied her face for a long moment, as if trying to understand something that puzzled him. "You are not like other white women I have heard described." "How so?" "The stories told in our lodges speak of white women who fear us, who see us as nothing more than savages to be avoided or driven away. Yet you risk your safety to help a stranger, and you speak of sending word to my people as if it were the most natural thing in the world." Catherine considered this. "I suppose I've never had reason to fear your people. I've lived alone here for years and never had trouble with anyone, white or Indian. I judge people by their actions, not the color of their skin or the clothes they wear." Something in Standing Wolf's expression shifted, becoming warmer somehow. "Your parents raised you well." "My parents are both gone now," Catherine said. "My father died of a heart attack 3 years ago. My mother died 2 years before that. It's just me in the homestead now." "You live alone?" There was surprise in his voice, and perhaps concern. "I manage well enough. The land provides, and I have good neighbors who check on me from time to time." Standing Wolf was quiet, but Catherine could see him processing this information. She wondered what he was thinking, whether the idea of a woman living alone seemed strange or admirable. To him, "You must be hungry," she said, changing the subject. "I have some soup that might sit well with you." Standing Wolf nodded gratefully, and Catherine went to the kitchen to heat the broth she had prepared the night before. As she worked, she found herself thinking about their conversation. There had been something in the way he spoke about his capture, particularly when he had mentioned his necklace, that suggested he hadn't told her the whole story. She had noticed the extraordinary quality of his jewelry and weapons, But now she wondered if they represented more than simple wealth. Among the Plains tribes, certain ornaments were markers of leadership, passed down through generations of chiefs and war leaders. Could Standing Wolf be someone of genuine importance among his people? When she returned with the soup, she found him sitting up against the pillows, moving carefully but with obvious determination to regain his strength. Catherine helped him eat, noting how he maintained perfect posture even while injured, and the way he thanked her with formal courtesy. That spoke of careful upbringing. "Standing Wolf," she said when he had finished eating, "can I ask you something?" He nodded. "Double quotes, the men who attacked you, did they take anything besides your horse?" His face hardened. "They took my brother's horses and weapons. And they took ... He paused, touching his throat where the ornate necklace lay. "They tried to take this, but the cord was strong and they were in a hurry to leave. I think they believed me dead." Catherine noticed he still hadn't directly answered her question about what the necklace represented, but she didn't press. She was beginning to suspect that Standing Wolf was far more than he had revealed, and that she might have rescued someone whose disappearance would have serious consequences. As if reading her thoughts, Standing Wolf spoke again. "Catherine Mitchell, I need you to understand something. The debt I owe you is greater than you know. When I am healed and can return to my people, this kindness will not be forgotten." There was something almost formal about the way he said it, as if he were making an official proclamation rather than simply expressing gratitude. "I don't expect anything in return," Catherine said. "I did what anyone with a heart would do." Standing Wolf shook his head slowly. "Among my people, there are laws older than memory about such debts. You have given me my life when I had no claim on your mercy. This creates bonds that cannot be easily broken." Catherine felt a flutter of unease. She was beginning to realize that her simple act of compassion might have complicated consequences she hadn't considered. She had no idea how right she was. The morning sun streamed through Catherine's kitchen window as she prepared a more substantial breakfast for Standing Wolf. 3 days had passed since his awakening, and his recovery had been remarkable. The head wound was healing cleanly, and though his shoulders still pained him, he had regained much of his strength. Catherine cracked eggs into the iron skillet, their sizzle joining the familiar sounds of morning birds calling from the cottonwoods, the distant lowing of cattle, and the gentle whistle of wind through the eaves. What wasn't familiar was the presence of another person in her home, and how naturally she had adapted to caring for someone else. Standing Wolf had proven to be a considerate patient. He spoke little but observed everything, his dark eyes taking in details of her daily routine with an intensity that suggested he was learning far more than simple recovery required. Catherine had caught him studying her medical supplies, the layout of her home, even the way she handled tools and weapons. "The eggs are ready," she called toward the main room, where Standing Wolf had taken to sitting by the window each morning, watching the horizon with the patience his grandmother had supposedly recognized in him. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, moving with only a slight stiffness in his injured shoulder. The formal buckskin clothing had been replaced with one of her father's old shirts and a pair of trousers that were slightly too short for his tall frame, but the effect only emphasized his natural dignity. "You are too generous," he said, settling carefully into the chair across from her. "I should be hunting for our food, not consuming your stores." Catherine served the eggs along with fresh biscuits and honey. "You're healing. That's work enough for now." As they ate, Catherine found herself studying Standing Wolf's face in the morning light. The bruising had faded considerably, revealing the strong bone structure she had noticed that first day. But more than his physical recovery, it was the way he carried himself that impressed her. Even weakened by injury, there was an unmistakable authority about him that spoke of a man accustomed to leadership. "Standing Wolf," she said, setting down her coffee cup, "I've been thinking about what you said, about getting word to your people. I know a man in Copper Ridge who trades with various tribes. Maybe he could help. Standing Wolf's expression grew thoughtful. This traitor, what is his name? Marcus Brennan. He's been working in these territories for over a decade. My father used to do business with him, Brennan. Standing Wolf repeated the name slowly, as if testing it. I know of this man. He is honest in his dealings, though he drives a hard bargain. Catherine felt surprised. You know him? Our paths have crossed. He has traded with several bands of our people over the years. Standing Wolf paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully. Catherine, before we contact anyone, there is something you must understand about my situation. The serious tone in his voice made Catherine set down her fork. What is it? Standing Wolf was quiet for a long moment, his fingers absently tracing the rim of his coffee cup. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that made Catherine realize she was about to learn something significant. The necklace I wear, it is not merely decoration or even a symbol of wealth. It is the mark of my birthright. He met her eyes. Directly, I am the eldest son of Chief Windwalker of the northern Arapaho. When my father passes into the spirit world, I will lead our people. Catherine felt her world tilt slightly. She had suspected Standing Wolf was someone important, but this revelation was staggering. She had been caring for a future chief, someone whose welfare could affect the fate of an entire tribe. Why didn't you tell me before? She asked quietly. Because I wanted to know who you truly were before I revealed who I am. Among my people, such knowledge brings responsibility. Once you know, you become connected to our fate in ways that cannot be undone. Catherine absorbed this, understanding. Beginning to dawn. The men who attacked you, they weren't just thieves, were they? Standing Wolf's jaw tightened. No, they were hired men, sent to prevent me from returning home. There are those among the white settlers who believe that removing me permanently would leave our people without strong leadership, making them easier to control or drive from their lands. The implications hit Catherine like a physical blow. They tried to murder you. Yes, and now that they believe they have succeeded, my people are likely preparing for the worst. My father is aging, and without me to provide continuity of leadership, our band faces a difficult future. Catherine pushed back from the table, her mind racing. We have to get word to your people immediately. They need to know you're alive. Standing Wolf studied her face intently. Catherine, you must understand what you are suggesting. If we send word that I am alive and recovering in your home, it will not remain secret for long. The same men who tried to kill me will learn of my survival, and they will come for me. Anyone sheltering me will be seen as an enemy. Catherine felt a chill run down her spine, but her resolve didn't waver. Then we'll have to be ready for them. You would risk this? Knowing it could bring violence to your door? Catherine met his gaze steadily. Standing Wolf, when I found you dying by that creek, I made a choice. I could have walked away and let fate decide your future. Instead, I chose to fight for your life. I'm not going to stop fighting now just because the stakes are higher. Something shifted in Standing Wolf's expression, surprise, perhaps, or admiration. You speak like a warrior. I speak like someone who believes in doing what's right, regardless of the cost. Standing Wolf was quiet for a long moment, and Catherine could see him wrestling with conflicting emotions. Finally, he spoke. There's another complication you must consider. Among my people, when someone saves the life of a future chief, it creates bonds that extend far beyond simple gratitude. My father and the Council of Elders will feel obligated to honor such a debt in ways that might change your life forever. Catherine frowned. What do you mean? I mean that once my people learn what you have done, you will no longer be simply Catherine Mitchell, the white woman who lives alone by Willow Creek. You will become someone of significance within our tribe. Someone whose welfare becomes our responsibility, just as my welfare became yours. The weight of his words settled over Catherine like a heavy blanket. She was beginning to understand that her simple act of mercy had set in motion events that would ripple far beyond anything she had imagined. "What exactly are you trying to tell me?" she asked. Standing Wolf leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. "I am trying to tell you that if we send word to my people, there will be no going back to your quiet life. The forces that tried to kill me will see you as a threat to be eliminated. My people will see you as someone to be protected and honored. Either way, your life as it was is over." Catherine absorbed this, feeling the full magnitude of her situation for the first time. When she had dragged Standing Wolf from that creek, she had thought she was simply saving a life. Now she realized she had stepped into the middle of a conflict, much larger than herself, with consequences she was only beginning to understand. But even knowing all this, her answer came without hesitation. "Then we send word." Standing Wolf searched her face. "You are certain? Once this choice is made, it cannot be unmade." "I'm certain." Catherine's voice was steady and strong. "I won't let your people believe you're dead when I have the power to tell them otherwise. And I won't let you sacrifice yourself to protect me from consequences I'm willing to face." Standing Wolf sat back in his chair, and for the first time since she had known him, Catherine saw genuine emotion break through his composed exterior. His eyes brightened with what might have been tears, though none fell. "You honor me," he said, quietly, "and you honor my people. I will not forget this courage." Catherine felt heat rise in her cheeks at the intensity of his gratitude. "So how do we do this? How do we get word to your father without alerting the wrong people?" Standing Wolf considered this. "Brennan would be our best option, but we cannot simply send him a message. Too many people would learn of my survival too quickly. We need a more careful approach." "What do you suggest?" "I suggest we bring Brennan here, tell him only what he needs to know, and ask him to carry a message that appears to be routine trading information, but contains coded words my people will recognize." Catherine nodded slowly. "That could work. But first we need to get him here without arousing suspicion. Brennan doesn't usually come out this way unless there's business to be done." Standing Wolf's eyes glinted with what might have been amusement. "Then we will have to create business. You said you sometimes trade with him?" "Occasionally. Usually furs or excess crops in exchange for supplies I can't produce myself." "Then you will send word that you have something valuable to trade, something worth the journey to your homestead." Catherine thought about this. "I do have a collection of wolf pelts from last winter. They're prime quality, worth good money. Brennan would make the trip for those." "Perfect. We can send the message through one of your neighbors. Make it seem like routine business." Catherine felt a surge of determination. "I'll ride to the Larson place this afternoon. Henrik's grandson Tommy makes the trip to Copper Ridge twice a week. He can carry the message without thinking anything of it." Standing Wolf nodded approvingly. "You think like a strategist. My people will appreciate that quality." As they planned the details, Catherine found herself studying Standing Wolf with new eyes. Knowing his true identity cast everything about him in a different light: the natural authority, the formal courtesy, the way he seemed to weigh every word before speaking. This was a man bred to leadership, someone whose decisions would affect the lives of hundreds of people. "Standing Wolf," she said during a pause in their planning, "can I ask you something personal?" He nodded. "What's it like, knowing that someday you'll be responsible for an entire people? Does it frighten you?" Standing Wolf considered the question. "Seriously, it is the weight I was born to carry. My father has been preparing me for this responsibility since I could walk. But yes, there are times when the magnitude of it feels overwhelming. How do you handle that?" "I remember that leadership is not about having all the answers. It is about making the best decisions possible with the information available and accepting the consequences of those choices. Good leaders surround themselves with wise advisors and listen more than they speak." Catherine found herself impressed by his wisdom. "Your father taught you well. My father, my grandfather, the elders of our tribe, they all contributed to my education. Leadership among our people is not something one person can master alone. As the conversation continued, Catherine began to see not just the future chief, but the man behind the title. Standing Wolf spoke of his responsibilities with gravity, but also with genuine care for his people's welfare. This was not someone who saw leadership as privilege, but as sacred duty. There is something else you should know, Standing Wolf said as they finished their meal. When my people learn of your kindness, they will want to thank you properly. This may involve ceremonies and honors that might seem strange to you. Catherine felt a flutter of nervousness. What kind of ceremonies? That will depend on my father and the Council of Elders. But at minimum, you will likely be formally adopted into our tribe, given a name in our language, and granted the protection that comes with being family. Family? Catherine's voice came out smaller than she intended. Standing Wolf's expression gentled. Catherine, among our people, when someone saves a life as you have saved mine, they become more than a friend. They become kin. The bonds formed by such acts are considered sacred, permanent as the mountains and lasting as the stars. Catherine felt overwhelmed by the implications. I don't know anything about your customs, your language, your way of life. You will learn if you choose to. But know this, no one will force these honors upon you. If you prefer to remain apart from our people after my rescue, that choice will be respected, though it would sadden us. The sincerity in his voice touched something deep in Catherine's heart. She had lived alone for so long, responsible only for herself and her small homestead. The idea of belonging to something larger, of having a place within a community that valued her contribution, was both terrifying and appealing. Let's focus on getting you home first, she said finally. We can worry about the rest later. Standing Wolf smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him. Spoken like someone who understands that the future must be built one decision at a time. After breakfast, Catherine began preparing for her ride to the Larson homestead. She selected the finest wolf pelts from her collection, bundling them carefully for transport. The pelts were indeed valuable, thick, lustrous fur from animals taken during the harsh winter months when their coats were at their peak. Standing Wolf watched her work with obvious interest. You are skilled at preparing furs. This is not common knowledge among white women. Catherine smiled. My father taught me. He said survival on the frontier required learning every skill that might prove useful. She paused in her work. He would have liked you, I think. How can you be certain? Because he judged people by their character, not their circumstances. He would have respected your strength and your dedication to your people. Standing Wolf was quiet for a moment. I would have been honored to know him. As Catherine finished her preparations, she found herself thinking about the journey ahead. Once she sent that message to Brennan, there would be no turning back. The quiet life she had built for herself would be forever changed. But looking at Standing Wolf, seeing the hope and determination in his eyes, she knew she was making the right choice. Some things were worth the risk, and saving a good man's life and potentially preventing conflict between their peoples was definitely one of them. I'll be back before dark, she said, securing the fur bundle to Luna's saddle. Try to rest. While I'm gone, you're still healing. Standing Wolf nodded, but Catherine could see the restless energy in him, the desire to be taking action rather than waiting for others to act on his behalf. Standing Wolf, she said, pausing at the door. When this is all over, when you're home safe with your people, what will you tell them about your time here? He met her eyes, his expression serious but warm. I will tell them that I learned something important about the white people who share these lands. I will tell them that not all of them are enemies, and that some possess honor and courage that would make any Arapaho proud. Catherine felt her cheeks warm at the compliment. And I'll tell anyone who asks that I learned something important too, that courage and wisdom come in many forms, and that true nobility has nothing to do with the color of a person's skin. With that, she mounted Luna and set off toward the Larson homestead, carrying more than just a message to trade furs. She was carrying the first step toward a future neither she nor Standing Wolf could fully imagine, but both were brave enough to embrace. Catherine returned from the Larson homestead. As the sun touched the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, the message was sent. Tommy Larson would carry word to Marcus Brennan that Catherine Mitchell had premium wolf pelts to trade, worth his personal attention. By her estimation, Brennan would arrive within 3 days, possibly sooner if he was. Already planning a trip to the northern settlements. She found Standing Wolf on the front porch, sitting in her father's old rocking chair with a rifle across his knees. The sight startled her until she realized he was standing guard, watching the approaches to the homestead with the focused attention of a trained warrior. "See anything concerning?" she asked as she dismounted and began unsaddling Luna. "2 riders passed on the far ridge about an hour ago," Standing Wolf replied, his eyes still scanning the horizon. They stopped to observe the homestead for several minutes before moving on. Catherine felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. "Could you tell anything about them?" "White men, well-armed, riding horses that showed signs of hard travel. They stayed at the tree line, using cover to avoid being clearly seen." Standing Wolf's voice carried the calm authority of someone accustomed to evaluating threats. "It could be innocent travelers curious about smoke from an isolated homestead. But given our circumstances, I thought it wise to be prepared." Catherine nodded, appreciating his caution. "The message is sent. Tommy seemed eager to earn the $1 I offered for his trouble, and he'll reach Copper Ridge tomorrow evening." "Good, now we wait." Standing Wolf rose from the chair, moving with only the slightest stiffness. His recovery had been remarkable, testament to both his natural strength and Catherine's careful nursing. "How much do you know about defensive positions around your homestead?" The question caught Catherine off guard. "Defensive positions? If the men who tried to kill me learn of my survival and come looking, we will need every advantage." Standing Wolf gestured toward the surrounding terrain. "Your father chose this location well, good sight lines, water access, natural barriers, but there are improvements we could make." Catherine looked at her home with new eyes, trying to see it as Standing Wolf did. The cabin sat on a slight rise overlooking Willow Creek, with clear views in 3 directions. The barn and outbuildings formed a rough semicircle that could provide cover, and the creek itself created a natural barrier to the south. "What kind of improvements?" she asked. Standing Wolf descended the porch steps, favoring his injured shoulder. "Only slightly. Additional cover near the house, prepared positions for rifle fire, obstacles to slow approaching riders. Small changes that could make a significant difference if we face an attack." As they walked the perimeter of the homestead, Catherine found herself seeing the familiar landscape through the eyes of someone trained in warfare. Standing Wolf pointed out vulnerable approaches, suggested modifications to existing structures, and outlined simple preparations that could turn her peaceful home into a defensible position. "You think like a military commander," Catherine observed. As they completed their circuit, "I was trained to think like one. A chief who cannot protect his people is no leader at all." Standing Wolf paused near the barn, studying the arrangement of outbuildings. "But I hope such preparations prove unnecessary. Perhaps the men who attacked me believe their work is finished and will not come searching." Catherine heard the uncertainty in his voice. "But you don't think so?" "No," Standing Wolf admitted. "These were not common thieves or opportunistic killers. They were hired for a specific purpose to prevent my return to my people. Until they have proof of my death, they will continue searching." The weight of their situation settled over Catherine like a physical presence. She had known intellectually that harboring Standing Wolf carried risks, but hearing him analyze their defenses made the danger feel immediate and real. "Standing Wolf," she said as they walked back toward the house, "tell me about your people. If we're going to be connected to them through all this, I should understand who they are." Standing Wolf's expression warmed at the question. "The northern Arapaho are a proud people, Catherine. We have lived on these plains for generations beyond counting, following the buffalo herds and the changing seasons. We are skilled horsemen, brave warriors, and devoted to our families and traditions." As they settled on the porch with cups of coffee, Standing Wolf began sharing stories of his childhood, his education as a future leader, and the challenges his people faced in a rapidly changing world. Catherine listened with growing fascination, learning about a culture rich in tradition, honor, and connection to the natural world. "My father became chief when I was 12 years old," Standing Wolf continued. "The previous chief, my grandfather, died in a skirmish with Crow raiders. My father was young for such responsibility, but the Council of Elders recognized his wisdom and courage. It must have been difficult for him, taking leadership so young. It was. But my grandfather had prepared him well, just as my father has prepared me. Among our people, leadership is not inherited automatically. It must be earned through proven wisdom, courage, and devotion to the tribe's welfare." Catherine found herself curious about the day-to-day realities of Arapaho life. "What will your responsibilities be when you become chief?" Standing Wolf considered the question carefully. "I will be responsible for the welfare of nearly 400 people, men, women, children, and elders. I must ensure they have food, shelter, protection from enemies, and guidance in spiritual matters. I must negotiate with other tribes, with the American government, and with white settlers who encroach on our traditional lands." The magnitude of such responsibility impressed Catherine. "That's an enormous burden for one person." It is why chiefs are supported by councils of elders, war leaders, and spiritual advisors. No one person can possess all the wisdom needed to guide a people. Standing Wolf smiled slightly. "My father often says that a wise chief's greatest skill is knowing when to listen and when to act." As the evening progressed, Catherine found herself sharing her own stories, her childhood on the frontier, her parents' dreams of building something lasting in the wilderness, and her struggles to maintain the homestead alone after their deaths. Standing Wolf listened with the same focused attention he brought to everything else, asking thoughtful questions that showed genuine interest in her experiences. "You have built a good life here," he said as darkness settled over the plains. "Your parents would be proud of what you have accomplished." Catherine felt warmth at his words. "Some days I wonder if I'm fooling myself, trying to maintain something this big on my own. The work never ends, and there are times when the isolation feels overwhelming." "Isolation can be a burden," Standing Wolf agreed. "Among my people, no. One lives alone unless by choice, and even then, the community ensures their needs are met. The idea of a woman managing such a large homestead without family support would seem strange to us. Does that make you think less of me?" Catherine asked, surprised by her own vulnerability in the question. Standing Wolf turned to look at her directly, his dark eyes serious in the lamplight. "It makes me admire you even more. What you have accomplished requires not just skill and determination, but tremendous courage. You face challenges that would defeat many men, yet you persist with grace and strength." Catherine felt her cheeks warm at the sincerity in his voice. "I just do what needs to be done. That is exactly what makes you remarkable. You see necessity and respond to it without complaint or self-pity. It is a quality my people value highly." There. Conversation was interrupted by the distant sound of hoofbeats approaching from the east. Both of them tensed, and Standing Wolf rose smoothly to retrieve the rifle he had left inside the door. "How many?" Catherine whispered, straining to listen. Standing Wolf tilted his head, his expression focused. "2 horses, moving at a steady pace. not trying to approach stealthily, but not announcing themselves either. Catherine felt her heart rate increase as the hoofbeats grew louder. They had expected visitors eventually, but she had hoped for more time to prepare. The riders appeared at the edge of the lamplight, 2 men mounted on travel-worn horses, their faces shadowed by wide-brimmed hats. Catherine recognized neither of them, but something about their bearing made her instinctively step closer to Standing Wolf. "Evening, ma'am," called the lead rider, his voice carrying a false friendliness that set Catherine's nerves on edge. "Sorry to disturb you so late, but we're looking for information about a missing friend." Catherine forced her voice to remain steady. "What kind of information?" "We're tracking a wounded Indian who might have passed through this area. Tall fellow, probably injured pretty bad." "You haven't seen anything like that, have you?" Standing Wolf remained motionless beside her, but Catherine could feel the tension radiating from him like heat from a forge. These were undoubtedly the men who had tried to kill him or their associates. "I haven't seen any Indians, wounded or otherwise," Catherine replied, grateful that her voice came out calm and controlled. "This area doesn't see much traffic of any kind." The second rider spoke up, his voice rougher than his companions. "Funny. Thing is, we found tracks leading in this direction. Horse tracks and blood, like someone was helping a wounded man." Catherine's mind raced. They must have backtracked from where Standing Wolf was originally attacked, following whatever trail he had left before collapsing at the creek. "I wouldn't know anything about that," she said firmly. "As I said, I haven't seen anyone." The lead rider leaned forward in his saddle, studying Catherine's face in the lamplight. "You sure about that, ma'am? Because it would be real unfortunate if someone was harboring a dangerous criminal." "Criminal?" Catherine kept her voice level despite her rising anger. "What crime has this person supposedly committed?" "Murder," the man said flatly. "Killed 2 white men in cold blood before escaping. That's why we're so eager to find him." Catherine knew it was a lie Standing Wolf had told her about the attack, about trying to negotiate before being forced to fight. But she also recognized the trap being set. If she admitted to seeing him, these men would claim justification for whatever violence followed. "Well, as I've told you, I haven't seen anyone matching that description," Catherine said with finality. "Now, if you'll excuse me, it's late and I have work to do in the morning." The 2 men exchanged glances, clearly not satisfied with her answers. The lead rider touched the brim of his hat in a mockery of courtesy. "Of course, ma'am. Sorry to bother you. But if you do happen to see anything suspicious, we'd appreciate word. We'll be staying in Copper Ridge for a few more days, asking questions." Catherine nodded without speaking, watching as the men turned their horses and disappeared back into the darkness. She and Standing Wolf remained motionless until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely. "They'll be back," Standing Wolf said quietly. "I know." Catherine surprised herself with how calm she felt. The immediate danger had passed, but the threat remained very real. "They don't believe me. Would you, in their position?" A woman living alone, claiming to have seen nothing when they clearly followed a trail to this area. Standing Wolf shook his head. "They will watch the homestead, looking for evidence of my presence." Catherine felt a surge of determination. "Then we'll have to be more careful. And we'll have to speed up our timeline with Brennan." Standing Wolf studied her face in the lamplight. "Catherine, you still have time to change your mind. You could tell them I was here but left, send them searching in another direction. You don't have to risk yourself further for my sake." Catherine met his gaze steadily. "Is that what you would do if our situations were reversed?" Standing Wolf was quiet for a long moment. "No," he said finally. "I would see it through to the end, whatever the cost." "Then you understand why I can't do any less." Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition of shared values and mutual respect that transcended the differences in their backgrounds. Catherine realized that her feelings for Standing Wolf had evolved beyond simple compassion for an injured stranger. She had come to genuinely care about him as a person, to value his wisdom and strength, and to respect the burdens he carried. As a future leader, "We should prepare for their return," Standing Wolf said, his voice carrying new urgency. "They will likely come back tomorrow night, possibly with more men. And they will not announce themselves next time." Catherine nodded, feeling the last vestiges of her peaceful existence slipping away. "What do we need to do?" Standing Wolf's expression became focused and strategic. "First, we prepare defensive positions as we discussed. Second, we establish signals and escape routes in case we become separated. Third, we hope that Brennan arrives before they make their move." As they began planning their defenses, Catherine found herself thinking about the magnitude of the changes in her life. A week ago, her biggest concern had been whether the winter stores would last until spring. Now she was preparing to defend her home against killers while harboring a future chief whose survival could affect the fate of an entire people. But looking at Standing Wolf, seeing the respect and growing affection in his eyes, Catherine knew she wouldn't change her choices, even if she could. Some paths, once taken, led to destinations that transformed everything about who you were meant to become. "Standing Wolf," she said as they concluded their planning, "whatever happens, I want you to know that I'm glad I found you that day." His smile was gentle and warm. "And I want you to know that meeting you has changed how I see the possibilities for peace between our peoples. Your courage gives me hope that others might choose understanding over fear." Catherine felt her heart swell at his words. She was beginning to understand that what had started as a simple rescue had become something much larger, a bridge between two worlds, built on trust, respect, and growing love. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight she was exactly where she belonged. The morning after the stranger's visit brought an unsettling stillness to Catherine's homestead. Even the birds seemed quieter, as if sensing the tension that hung over the valley like storm clouds. Catherine moved through her morning chores with heightened awareness, every sound making her glance toward the rifle she now kept within arm's reach. Standing Wolf had spent the pre-dawn hours creating defensive positions around the property, using his knowledge of warfare to turn familiar features into strategic advantages. A pile of firewood became cover for a shooting position. The root cellar entrance was camouflaged with brush, creating a potential escape route. Even the chicken coop was repositioned to block one approach to the house. "You work like a man who's done this before," Catherine observed as she brought him coffee and biscuits. "Too many times," Standing Wolf replied, his eyes continuously scanning the horizon. "When you're responsible for protecting the people who have many enemies, you learn to see every place as either a fortress or a trap." Catherine settled beside him on the makeshift barricade he'd constructed from hay bales and fence posts. "Is that how you see my homestead, as a trap?" Standing Wolf considered her question seriously. "It could become one if we're not careful. The isolation that protects you in peaceful times works against us now. But it also means we control who approaches and from which directions." Their conversation was interrupted by the sight of a dust cloud rising from the eastern trail. Catherine felt her stomach clench until she recognized the familiar outline of Henrik Larsson's wagon, with young Tommy driving and old Henrik riding beside him. "Company," Standing Wolf said, immediately moving toward the house where he could remain hidden but still cover Catherine if needed. Catherine walked out to meet the wagon, forcing a smile despite her nervousness. Henrik Larsson was 73 years old, with the weathered face and keen eyes of someone who had survived 4 decades on the frontier. His grandson Tommy was 19, earnest and hardworking, the kind of young man Catherine's father would have approved of. "Morning, Catherine," Henrik called as the wagon approached. "Hope you don't mind the early visit, but we've got news that couldn't wait." Catherine felt a chill of apprehension. "What kind of news?" Henrik climbed down from the wagon with the careful movements of advanced age. "Tommy here delivered your message to Marcus Brennan yesterday evening, just like you asked. But there's been complications. Tommy nodded eagerly, clearly excited to be part of important events. Tell her about the stranger's grandfather. Henrik's expression grew grim. Two men came to Brennan's trading post not an hour after Tommy left. Described themselves as territorial marshals, claimed they were tracking a dangerous Indian who'd killed white settlers. Catherine's heart sank. The men who had visited her the night before had wasted no time spreading their lies in Copper Ridge. What did they want from Brennan? She asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Information about any recent contact with Indians, particularly any injured ones seeking help or trade. They seemed mighty interested when Brennan mentioned he sometimes traded with folks out this way. Tommy leaned forward eagerly. They asked specific questions about you, Miss Mitchell. Wanted to know if you'd ever had dealings with Indians, if you lived alone, that kind of thing. Catherine felt exposed, as if hostile eyes were watching her even now. What did Brennan tell them? Henrik's weathered face creased with concern. Marcus is no fool, Catherine. He gave them basic information, that you're a decent woman trying to make an honest living on your father's land. But he didn't mention the message about the furs, and he didn't tell them he was planning to visit you. Good, Catherine said, relieved that Brennan had shown discretion. But here's the thing, Henrik continued, his voice dropping lower. These men didn't strike Brennan as real marshals. Something about them felt wrong, too eager, too interested in details that wouldn't matter to law enforcement. Tommy nodded vigorously. Brennan said real marshals would have wanted to organize a proper search, bring in local trackers, contact the territorial governor. These men just wanted information about specific people. Catherine absorbed this, understanding that her enemies were systematically gathering intelligence for their next move. Did Brennan say when he might visit to see about the furs? Henrik and Tommy exchanged glances. That's the other problem, Henrik said slowly. These strangers made it clear they'd be watching Brennan's movements, following up on any contacts he made with isolated homesteads. Brennan's worried that visiting you now might lead them straight to whatever they're really looking for. Catherine felt the walls closing in around their plans. Without Brennan, they had no safe way to contact Standing Wolf's people, but waiting too long increased the risk of discovery with each passing day. There's more, Tommy added, his excitement dimmed by the gravity of what he was sharing. Word in town is that these men have hired additional help. Local roughnecks, drifters looking for quick money. They're building a group to search the isolated homesteads systematically. Henrik placed a gentle hand on Catherine's shoulder. Catherine, I've known you since you were a girl, and I've never seen you involved in anything questionable. But these men seem convinced that someone in this area is hiding something they want very badly. Is there anything you need to tell us? Catherine felt the weight of Henrik's trust and concern. This man had been her father's friend and had watched over her since his death. He deserved honesty, but the truth would put him and Tommy in danger. Henrik, she said carefully, if someone came to you injured and needing help, what would you do? The old man's eyes sharpened with understanding. I'd help them, regardless of who they were or where they came from. That's what decent people do, even if it meant trouble for yourself. Henrik straightened, his voice gaining strength. Especially then, a man's character isn't tested when helping is easy and safe. It's tested when doing right comes with a price. Catherine felt tears prick her eyes at his words. Then you understand why I can't give you details that might put you at risk. Tommy looked confused, but Henrik nodded slowly. I understand. And I understand why those men are so interested in finding whatever they're looking for. He paused, studying Catherine's face. The question is, what do you need from us? Catherine was touched by his immediate offer of support. I need you to stay safe and keep your distance from whatever's happening here. I also need you to be careful about Brennan. If these men are watching him, any contact between you might be noticed. Henrik considered this. What if Brennan came to visit us instead? We trade with him regular-like, so it wouldn't seem unusual. And from our place, he could find a way to reach you without being followed. Catherine felt a surge of hope. Would you be willing to take that risk? For you? For what's right? Absolutely. Henrik's voice was firm. Your father saved my grandson's life during that blizzard of '68. The Larson family doesn't forget its debts. As they discussed the details of contacting Brennan through the Larson homestead, Catherine became aware of movement in the house behind her. Standing Wolf was positioning himself where he could observe the conversation without being seen, ready to act if the situation turned dangerous. Henrik, Catherine said, I need you to understand something. The situation I'm in, it's bigger than just helping an injured stranger. There are political implications that could affect relationships between different groups of people. If you help me, you might be taking sides in a conflict you don't fully understand. Henrik's laugh was short but genuine. Catherine, I've lived on this frontier for 40 years. I've seen good people and bad people of every color and background. I don't need to understand all the politics to know right from wrong. If you're helping someone who needs help, then I'm with you. Tommy nodded eagerly. Me too, Miss Mitchell, whatever you need. Catherine felt overwhelmed by their loyalty. Thank you. Both of you. I hope someday I can explain everything properly. When this is over, Henrik said, we'll expect the full story over coffee and cake. But for now, we'll do what needs doing and ask questions later. As the Larsons prepared to leave, Henrik pulled Catherine aside for a private word. These men asking questions, they're dangerous, aren't they? Catherine nodded. Very dangerous. They've already tried to kill once, and they won't hesitate to do it again if they feel threatened. Henrik's expression hardened. Then you take every precaution. Keep your rifle close, don't travel alone, and if you need help, you send up smoke. Signals or fire shots in the air, we'll come running. After the wagon disappeared down the trail, Catherine returned to the house to find Standing Wolf waiting with a troubled expression. Good neighbors, he observed. The best, Catherine agreed. They're willing to help without knowing all the facts. Standing Wolf was quiet for a moment. That kind of loyalty is precious, Catherine. Among my people, such friendship is considered sacred, but it also means their safety is now connected to ours. Catherine felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. By accepting Henrik and Tommy's help, she had potentially put them in danger from the same men who wanted Standing Wolf dead. Are you having second thoughts about all this? Standing Wolf asked gently. Catherine considered the question honestly. The simple rescue she had undertaken was now affecting multiple families, drawing more people into a dangerous situation with each passing day. The men hunting Standing Wolf were clearly well organized and ruthless, with resources to hire additional help and spread false information. Even if they successfully contacted Standing Wolf's people, there was no guarantee that help would arrive before their enemies struck. Sometimes, she admitted, not about helping you, I'd make that choice again without hesitation. But I worry about the consequences for others. Henrik and Tommy, Brennan, anyone who gets drawn into this mess because of me. Standing Wolf moved closer, his dark eyes serious. Catherine, leadership often means making decisions that affect others, knowing that some will face danger because of your choices. The burden of command is learning to weigh the greater good against immediate risks. Is that what you think this is? Leadership? What would you call it? You identified a need, made a difficult decision, and now you're coordinating the actions of multiple people to achieve a goal that serves justice and prevents greater conflict. If that's not leadership, I don't know what is. Catherine had never thought of her actions in those terms, but Standing Wolf's perspective made her consider her role differently. She wasn't just helping an injured stranger anymore, she was actively working to prevent a larger conflict between their peoples, even if it meant accepting personal risk. Among my people, Standing Wolf continued. When someone demonstrates the kind of courage and wisdom you've shown, they're often asked to take on greater responsibilities within the tribe. Your actions mark you as someone who can be trusted with important decisions. Catherine felt both honored and overwhelmed by his words. I don't know if I'm ready for that kind of responsibility. No good leader ever feels ready. Standing Wolf replied with a slight smile. The people who seek power are usually the ones least suited to wield it. Those who accept it reluctantly, out of duty rather than desire, often prove to be the wisest leaders. Their philosophical discussion was interrupted by the sound of horses approaching from the south, the opposite direction from which the Larsons had departed. Catherine grabbed her rifle while Standing Wolf moved to a window position that would give him a clear field of fire. This time, 3 riders approached the homestead, moving with the confident pace of men who had every right to be there. As they drew closer, Catherine recognized Marcus Brennan's distinctive black horse and weathered leather coat. "It's Brennan," she called to Standing Wolf, relief evident in her voice, but her relief was tempered by concern. If Brennan was being watched, his presence here could bring unwanted attention. And the fact that he had brought 2 companions suggested complications Catherine hadn't anticipated. Marcus Brennan was a man of middle years with intelligent eyes and the cautious manner of someone who had survived decades of dangerous trading ventures. The 2 men with him appeared to be his usual guards, experienced frontiersmen who knew how to handle trouble. "Catherine Mitchell," Brennan called as he dismounted. "I got word you had some prime wolf pelts to trade. Thought I'd better come see for myself before the word got around too much." Catherine understood the subtext immediately. Brennan was here because he suspected there was more to her sudden desire to trade than simple commerce, and he was being careful about how he approached the situation. "Mr. Brennan," Catherine replied, walking out to meet him. "I appreciate you making the trip. The pelts are exactly what I described, winter prime wolf fur that should bring good prices in the eastern markets." Brennan's eyes studied her face. "Carefully, I'm sure they are. Mind if my boys water their horses while we conduct our business? It's been a long ride." Catherine nodded, understanding that Brennan wanted his guards positioned where they could watch for trouble while he learned what was really happening. As Brennan's men led the horses toward the creek, the trader stepped closer to Catherine, his voice dropping to a conversational level that wouldn't carry far. "Catherine, I've been trading these territories for 12 years, and I've learned to recognize when something's not quite right. You want to tell me what's really going on here?" Catherine looked into Marcus Brennan's weathered face and made a decision that would determine the fate of everyone involved. The trader's eyes held both wariness and genuine concern, and she realized that half-truths would no longer suffice. "Mr. Brennan, what I'm about to tell you will put you in danger just by knowing it. Are you prepared for that?" Brennan's expression grew more serious. "I've been in danger most of my adult life, Catherine. The question is whether the danger is worth the cause." Catherine glanced toward the house, where she knew Standing Wolf was listening to every word. "There's an injured Arapaho warrior in my home. He's the son of Chief Windwalker, and there are men who want him dead to prevent him from returning to his people." Brennan's eyes widened slightly, but his voice remained steady. "How badly injured?" "He's mostly healed now, but he was near death when I found him. The men hunting him believe they succeeded in killing him. And you need to get word to his father without alerting these hunters." "Exactly." Brennan was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications. "Catherine, do you understand what you're asking? If Chief Windwalker's son has been missing, the northern Arapaho are probably already preparing for war. They'll assume he was murdered by white settlers." Catherine felt her stomach drop. War? The death of a chief's heir, especially under suspicious circumstances, would be seen as an act of aggression that demands response. If we don't get word to them soon that he's alive, innocent people on both sides could die. The weight of responsibility crashed over Catherine like a physical blow. She had been so focused on protecting Standing Wolf and getting him home safely that she hadn't fully considered the larger consequences of his disappearance. "How long do we have?" she asked. "Hard to say. Could be days, could be weeks. Depends on how quickly the War Council reaches a decision." Brennan's expression was grim. "But I can tell you that every day we delay makes peaceful resolution less likely." Catherine felt the walls closing in from all sides. The men hunting Standing Wolf were organizing a systematic search that would eventually lead them here. His people were potentially preparing for war because they believed him dead. And now she had learned that the stakes were far higher than she had imagined. "There's something else," Brennan continued. "Those men asking questions in town, they're not just local troublemakers. One of them was asking about territorial land surveys, specifically areas where mineral rights might be valuable. I think this is about more than just eliminating one. Man, it's about starting a conflict that would justify seizing Arapaho lands." Catherine felt sick as the full scope of the conspiracy became clear. Standing Wolf's assassination was meant to trigger a war that would benefit men who wanted to claim valuable territories. His survival threatened not just their immediate plans, but their long-term schemes for profit. "Will you help us?" Catherine asked quietly. Brennan studied her face for a long moment. "I've been trading with Northern Arapaho for 8 years. Chief Windwalker is an honorable man who's always dealt fairly with me. If his son is anything like his father, then yes, I'll help." Catherine felt a surge of relief, but Brennan held up a warning hand. "However, we need to do this carefully. Those men are watching my movements, and if I disappear for several days to reach the Arapaho camp, they'll know something's happening. What do you suggest?" "I suggest we bring the mountain to Mohammed, so to speak. Instead of me going to find Standing Wolf's people, we arrange for them to come to us." Catherine frowned. "How?" "There's a trading post at Iron Creek, about 40 miles northeast of here. It's run by a half Arapaho man named Joseph Crow Feather, who serves as an intermediary between his people and white traders. If I can get word to him, he can contact the Northern Arapaho camp much faster than I could." Catherine considered this. "But how do we get word to Crow Feather without being followed?" Brennan smiled for the first time since arriving. "That's where having the right friends comes in handy." He gestured toward his 2 companions, who were now positioned strategically around the homestead perimeter. "Jake there used to scout for the cavalry before he got tired of the politics. He knows every game trail and hidden path between here and Iron Creek. If anyone can deliver a message without being detected, it's him." Catherine felt hope beginning to rise. "And the message?" "A coded request for Crow Feather to contact Chief Windwalker immediately. The code will tell him it's urgent and involves the chief's family, without revealing specific details that could be dangerous if intercepted." Catherine was about to respond when she heard Standing Wolf's voice from inside the house. "Riders approaching from the north. Many of them." Catherine's blood ran cold. She grabbed her rifle while Brennan drew his pistol, his 2 guards immediately taking defensive positions behind the nearest cover. "How many?" Brennan called toward the house. 6, possibly 7, Standing Wolf replied, his voice carrying the calm authority of an experienced warrior. "Moving in formation, not like casual travelers." Catherine felt her heart pounding as the sound of hoofbeats grew louder. This was it, the confrontation she had been dreading since the first night the strangers had visited. "Catherine," Brennan said urgently, "is there a back way out of the house?" Root cellar entrance on the east side leads to a tunnel that comes out near the creek. "Good. Get your friend ready to move if things go badly." Catherine was about to protest that she wouldn't abandon her home when the riders came into view. 7 men on horseback, armed with rifles and moving with military precision. She recognized the 2 men who had visited before, but the others were strangers, hard-faced men who radiated violence. The leader raised his hand, and the group stopped. Just outside rifle range. Catherine noticed immediately that they had positioned themselves to block the main trail, cutting off escape in that direction. "Catherine Mitchell," the leader called out, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. "We're territorial marshals, with warrants to search your property. Come out peacefully and no one gets hurt." Catherine exchanged glances with Brennan, who shook his head slightly. Real marshals would have shown their warrants and followed proper procedures, not surrounded the homestead like a military assault. "Let me see those warrants," Catherine called back, stalling for time while she tried to think of options. "You'll see them when we search the property. Now come out with your hands visible." Brennan moved closer to Catherine, speaking quietly. "They're not going to negotiate. They plan to take the place by force and claim they found evidence of the fugitive. They're hunting." Catherine realized he was right. These men had come prepared for violence, not conversation. They believed Standing Wolf was here, and they intended to eliminate both him and any witnesses to their actions. "What are our options?" she asked. "Fight or run?" Brennan replied grimly. "And if we run, they'll burn your place and claim you were harboring criminals." Catherine looked at her father's house, the barn he had built with his own hands, the life she had constructed in this valley. Then she thought about Standing Wolf, injured and depending on her protection, and the larger war that would result. "If he died here." "We fight," she said firmly. Brennan nodded approvingly. "Jake, Tom," he called to his men, "defensive positions. Watch for flanking movements." Catherine moved toward the house, where Standing Wolf was waiting with her father's Winchester and a look of grim determination. "I should be out there with you," he said as she approached. "You're still healing, and you're the one they're really after. If something happens to me, you need to escape and get word to your people." Standing Wolf's expression hardened. "I will not hide while you face danger on my behalf." "It's not hiding, it's strategy. If they capture or kill both of us, everyone loses." Standing Wolf studied her face, recognizing the logic but clearly struggling with the warrior's instinct to fight beside his allies. "Promise me," Catherine said urgently, "that if things go badly, you'll use the tunnel and get away. Promise me you'll live to lead your people." Standing Wolf was quiet for a long moment. "I promise," he said finally, "but only if you promise to survive this fight. My people will need to honor the woman who saved their future chief." Catherine felt warmth spread through her chest at his words, but there was no time for sentiment. The riders were moving again, splitting into two groups, to approach from multiple directions. "They're coming," Brennan called. 3 from the front, 4 circling around back. Catherine checked her rifle one final time, ensuring she had adequate ammunition. She had hunted game for years and was a decent shot, but she had never aimed at another human being. "Catherine," Standing Wolf said softly, "among my people, warriors pray before battle. May I offer such a prayer for us?" Catherine nodded, touched by the gesture. Standing Wolf spoke briefly in his native language, his voice carrying a solemnity that needed no translation. When he finished, he met her eyes. "I ask the spirits to guide our aim and protect the innocent. And I ask them to ensure that our courage honors those we fight to protect." Catherine felt a sense of calm settle over her, as if Standing Wolf's prayer had blessed their cause and steadied her nerves. The attack began with gunfire from the front of the house, Brennan and his men returning fire from their positions behind the wagon and outbuildings. Catherine positioned herself at a window that gave her a clear view of the eastern approach, where she could see 2 riders dismounting and moving toward the house on foot. She aimed carefully at the first man, leading him slightly as he moved between cover points. When she squeezed the trigger, the rifle's sharp report was followed by the man's cry of pain as he stumbled and fell behind a water trough. "Good shot," Standing Wolf said from his position at the opposite window. "His companion is moving to flank your position." Catherine reloaded quickly, searching for the second attacker. She found him creeping along the edge of the barn, using its shadow for concealment. This shot was more difficult, longer range, and a smaller target, but Catherine forced herself to breathe steadily and squeezed the trigger smoothly. This time the man dropped completely, his rifle clattering away across the packed earth. Outside, the battle was intensifying. Brennan's voice could be heard directing his men's fire, and the sharp crack of rifles filled the air. Catherine could see muzzle flashes from multiple positions as the attackers pressed their assault. Two more coming around the barn, standing. Wolf warned, raising his own rifle despite his injured shoulder. Catherine saw the men moving with military precision, using cover effectively as they advanced on the house. These weren't common criminals or hired thugs. They were experienced fighters who knew how to work as a team. Standing Wolf's rifle spoke, and one of the advancing men spun and fell. But the other continued forward, reaching the corner of the house where he would have a clear shot at anyone. Inside, Catherine swung her rifle toward the new threat, but the man was already raising his weapon toward Standing Wolf's position. Time seemed to slow as Catherine realized she wouldn't be able to aim and fire before the attacker shot the man she had come to love. Without thinking, Catherine threw herself across the room, knocking Standing Wolf aside just as the gunman's rifle cracked. She felt a burning sensation across her left shoulder as the bullet grazed her, but both she and Standing Wolf tumbled safely to the floor. Standing Wolf rolled quickly, bringing his rifle to bear on the window where the gunman's muzzle was visible. His shot was true, and the threat was eliminated. "Catherine," Standing Wolf said urgently, seeing blood on her shoulder, "how badly are you hurt?" Catherine touched the wound gingerly, relieved to find it was only a graze. "I live. But we need to end this before they bring up more men." As if summoned by her words, Brennan's voice carried from outside. "They're pulling back. Looks like they're regrouping for another assault." Catherine moved to the window, seeing the surviving attackers gathering near their horses, clearly planning their next move. But as she watched, something unexpected happened. New sound reached her ears, the thunder of many horses approaching rapidly from the south. Catherine's heart sank, thinking the attackers had called for reinforcements, until she saw the riders who crested the ridge, mounted Arapaho warriors. At least 20 of them, racing toward the homestead with weapons ready and war paint gleaming in the afternoon sun. "My people," Standing Wolf breathed, his voice filled with wonder and relief. The effect on the attackers was immediate and dramatic. Realizing they were suddenly outnumbered 3-1 by experienced warriors, the surviving gunmen abandoned their assault and fled northward, spurring their horses desperately to escape the approaching force. Catherine watched in amazement as the Arapaho warriors swept past the fleeing attackers without pursuing, their focus clearly on reaching the homestead and ensuring their chief's son was safe. Standing Wolf rose to his feet, his face shining with joy and anticipation. "Crow Feather must have gotten word to them somehow. They came to find me." Catherine felt overwhelming relief wash over her. The immediate threat was over. Standing Wolf would be reunited with his people, and the larger war that might have resulted from his death had been prevented. But as she watched the approaching warriors, Catherine realized that while one chapter of this story was ending, another was about to begin. These men had come not just to rescue their future chief, but to meet the woman who had saved his life. And according to Standing Wolf, such a debt carried obligations and honors that would forever change her relationship with the Arapaho people. Catherine Mitchell, who had lived quietly and independently for years, was about to discover what it meant to become part of something much larger than herself. The thunder of hoofbeats gradually subsided as the Arapaho warriors slowed their approach, forming a wide semicircle around Catherine's homestead. The lead rider, a man of perhaps 50 years with silver threads in his long black hair and the bearing of absolute authority, raised his hand to signal a halt. Even from a distance, Catherine could see the resemblance between this man and Standing Wolf in the proud set of his shoulders and the intelligent dark eyes that missed nothing. "That's my father," Standing Wolf said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "Chief Windwalker." Catherine watched as the chief dismounted with fluid grace, his ornate war shirt and the massive eagle feather headdress marking his status unmistakably. The other warriors remained mounted, their disciplined formation and ready weapons speaking of a people who took no chances with their leader's safety. Standing Wolf moved toward the door, then paused and looked back at Catherine. "Will you come with me? It is important that my father sees us together when I tell him what you have done." Catherine felt suddenly self-conscious about her appearance, her dress torn and bloodstained from the battle, her hair disheveled and the bandage on her shoulder marking her as wounded. But Standing Wolf's expression was earnest, and she understood that this moment would set the tone for everything that followed. "Of course," she said, checking to ensure her rifle was unloaded before setting it aside. Together, they stepped onto the porch where Marcus Brennan and his men had already emerged from their defensive positions, their weapons lowered but held ready. The trader's weathered face showed a mixture of relief and apprehension as he took in the impressive array of mounted warriors. Chief Windwalker strode forward with measured steps, his keen eyes taking in every detail of the scene, the defensive positions, the evidence of recent battle, the way his son moved with only slight stiffness from his healing wounds. When his gaze settled on Catherine, she felt as if she were being evaluated by someone who could read the truth written in a person's soul. Standing Wolf began speaking in his native language, his voice carrying the formal cadence of someone making an important report to a superior. Catherine couldn't understand the words, but she could hear the respect and affection in his tone as he addressed his father. The chief listened without interruption, his expression growing more intense as the story unfolded. When Standing Wolf finished speaking, Chief Windwalker studied Catherine for a long moment before responding in heavily accented but clear English. "My son tells me that you found him dying by the creek and brought him to your home to heal. He says you risked your life to protect him from men who sought his death, and that you have shown him kindness beyond what duty required." Catherine felt the weight of every warrior's gaze upon her. "I did what anyone with a heart would do, Chief Windwalker. Your son was injured and needed help." The chief's weathered face remained impassive. "My son also tells me that when you learned who he was and understood the dangers that knowledge would bring, you chose to help him contact our people rather than send him away to protect yourself." "Yes, sir. I couldn't let you believe he was dead when I had the power to tell you otherwise." Chief Windwalker exchanged glances with several of the mounted warriors, and Catherine heard murmured conversations in their language. She couldn't understand the words, but the tone suggested debate or discussion of some significance. "Mrs. Mitchell," the chief said finally, "among our people, there are debts that cannot be repaid with horses or gold or promises. When someone saves the life of a chief's heir, particularly when they do so at great risk to themselves, it creates bonds that become part of tribal law." Catherine felt her stomach flutter with nervousness. "I don't understand what that means." Standing Wolf stepped closer to her, his presence offering silent support. "It means that you are no longer simply Catherine Mitchell who lives alone by Willow Creek. You have become someone of importance to the northern Arapaho, someone whose welfare is now our responsibility, just as my welfare became yours." Chief Windwalker nodded approvingly at his son's explanation. "But there is more. The manner in which you protected my son fighting beside him, taking a bullet meant for him, these actions mark you as a warrior in your own right. Among our people, such courage cannot go unrecognized." Catherine touched her bandaged shoulder self-consciously. "I'm not a warrior, Chief Windwalker. I'm just a frontier woman who knows how to handle a rifle." The chief's stern expression softened slightly, and Catherine thought she detected the ghost of a smile. "Courage is not determined by training or title, Mrs. Mitchell. It is determined by choices made in moments of trial. You have proven your courage beyond question. One of the mounted warriors rode forward, dismounting beside the chief. Catherine could see the family resemblance immediately. This man was clearly Standing Wolf's brother, with the same strong features and intelligent eyes. "This is my younger son, Running Bear," Chief Windwalker said. He led the war party that was preparing to avenge his brother's death. When Joseph Crowfeather brought word that Standing Wolf lived and was being protected by a white woman, Running Bear insisted on leading the rescue force personally. Running Bear stepped forward, his English more halting than his father's but clear enough. "Sister, you have given my brother back to us. This gift cannot be forgotten." Catherine felt startled by his use of the word sister, but before she could respond, Chief Windwalker continued speaking. "Mrs. Mitchell, my sons, I have discussed this matter during our journey here. The debt we owe you is too great to be settled with simple thanks or even valuable gifts. According to our customs, there's only one way to properly honor what you have done." Catherine felt a growing sense of anticipation mixed with anxiety. What way is that? Chief Windwalker straightened to his full height, his voice taking on the formal cadence of official pronouncement. "We offer you adoption into our tribe as a full member, with all the rights and protections that such membership brings. You will be given a name in our language, a place in our councils, and the support of our people for as long as you live." Catherine felt overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was being offered. "Chief Windwalker, I'm honored by your offer, but I don't know anything about your customs or way of life. I wouldn't know how to be part of your tribe." "You would learn," Standing Wolf said gently, "and you would have teachers eager to share their knowledge with someone who has proven worthy of our respect." Running Bear nodded enthusiastically. "Our women would welcome you as sister. Our warriors would protect you as family. Your courage has earned you a place among us." Catherine looked around at the assembled warriors, seeing faces that reflected curiosity, respect, and genuine warmth. These were people who had ridden hard to rescue their future chief, and now they were offering to make her one of them. "There is something else," Chief Windwalker said, his voice carrying a weight that made Catherine focus intently on his words. "Among our people, when a woman saves the life of an unmarried warrior of high rank, particularly when that warrior is heir to the chieftainship, certain possibilities are considered." Catherine felt her heart skip as she began to understand what he was suggesting. Possibilities? Standing Wolf stepped closer, his dark eyes intense. "My father is speaking of marriage, Catherine. Among our people, the bonds formed by saving a life often lead to unions that strengthen both families and create lasting alliances." Catherine felt the world tilt slightly. She had known that her feelings for Standing Wolf had evolved beyond simple compassion, but the idea of marriage, of permanently joining her life to his and to his people, was staggering in its implications. Catherine began, then found herself at a loss for words. Chief Windwalker raised a hand gently. "No decision is required today, Mrs. Mitchell. This is a matter that must be considered carefully by all involved. But I wanted you to understand that such a union would be welcomed by our people and would formally cement the alliance your courage has created." Catherine looked at Standing Wolf, seeing hope and uncertainty mingled in his expression. She realized that he wanted this outcome, but was afraid to pressure her, understanding the magnitude of what would be asked of her. "Standing Wolf," she said quietly, "is this what you want?" His answer came without hesitation. "More than anything. But only if it is what you want as well. I will not see you bound by obligation or gratitude to a life that would not make you happy." Catherine felt tears gathering in her eyes at the sincerity in his voice. Here was a man who could command the marriage he desired, but refused to do so. Preferring to risk her refusal rather than coerce her acceptance, Marcus Brennan, who had been listening to the entire exchange in respectful silence, cleared his throat diplomatically. Perhaps this would be a good time for refreshments and rest. "It's been a long day for everyone, and important decisions benefit from time and consideration. Chief Windwalker nodded approvingly. The trader speaks wisdom. We will make camp near the creek tonight, if you permit it, Mrs. Mitchell. Tomorrow we can continue our discussions. Catherine found her voice. Of course. You're welcome to camp anywhere that suits you. And please, call me Catherine. As the warriors began setting up their camp with the efficient movements of people, long accustomed to travel, Catherine found herself in conversation with several of the women who had accompanied the group. She learned that Standing Wolf's younger sister, Singing Bird, was among them, along with the wife of Running Bear, and several other women whose husbands held positions of importance within the tribe. You are smaller than I expected, Singing Bird said with a smile, her English excellent. Standing Wolf's messages through Crow Feather spoke of a warrior woman who could face down armed men without flinching. I pictured someone more imposing. Catherine laughed, feeling some of her nervousness ease. I think your brother may have exaggerated my fierce qualities. No, said Running Bear's wife, a serene woman named Gentle Rain. Warriors do not exaggerate about courage. If my brother-in-law says, you fought beside him like a true warrior, then you did exactly that. As the evening progressed, Catherine found herself drawn into conversations about Arapaho customs, daily life, and the challenges facing their people in an era of rapid change. She learned about their seasonal migrations, their complex spiritual beliefs, and their efforts to maintain traditional ways while adapting to the encroachment of white settlement. It is not easy, Singing Bird admitted during one conversation. We must choose carefully which changes to accept and which traditions to preserve. A wise leader helps guide these choices. Catherine understood the implication. As Standing Wolf's wife, she would be expected to help make such decisions, to serve as a bridge between white and Arapaho worlds. Later that evening, as the camp settled into the quiet rhythms of night, Standing Wolf approached Catherine where she sat on her porch, watching the stars emerge in the clear mountain air. May I join you? He asked. Catherine nodded, and he settled beside her on the wooden steps. For a few minutes they sat in comfortable silence, listening to the distant murmur of conversations around the Arapaho fires and the gentle rush of Willow Creek. Your shoulder, Standing Wolf said finally. How does it feel? Catherine touched the bandage gently, sore but healing. Your sister cleaned and redressed it properly. She has skilled hands. She learned from our grandmother, who was renowned as a healer. Singing Bird would be honored to teach you such skills if you choose to learn them. Catherine heard the unspoken question in his words. Standing Wolf, what would it really mean if I accepted your father's offer? What would my life become? Standing Wolf considered his answer carefully. It would mean becoming part of something larger than yourself, accepting responsibilities to people beyond just your own family. You would learn our language, our customs, our spiritual beliefs. You would participate in tribal councils, help make decisions that affect hundreds of people. During seasonal migrations, you would travel with us. During times of peace, you would help settle disputes and guide young people. During times of conflict, He paused. You would help determine how our people respond to threats. Catherine absorbed this, understanding that he was describing a life of genuine partnership and responsibility, not simply a ceremonial role. And personally, she asked, what would marriage mean between us? Standing Wolf's voice grew softer. It would mean sharing everything: joys, sorrows, burdens, hopes. It would mean building a life together based on mutual respect and affection that I believe has already begun to grow between us. Catherine felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. It has begun to grow, she agreed quietly. But Standing Wolf, I need you to understand something. If I accept this path, it won't be from gratitude or obligation. It will be because I've come to care for you deeply, and because I believe we could build something meaningful together. Standing Wolf turned to face her fully, his dark eyes reflecting the starlight. And I need you to understand that if you choose this path, you will be taking on challenges and responsibilities that will test every aspect of your strength and wisdom. Being the wife of a future chief is not an easy life. Catherine met his gaze steadily. I've never wanted an easy life, Standing Wolf. I've wanted a meaningful one. Standing Wolf reached for her hand, his touch gentle and warm. Then perhaps we should seriously consider what the spirits may have intended when they brought us together by that creek. Catherine squeezed his hand, feeling a sense of rightness settle over her like a blessing. Perhaps we should. As they sat together under the vast Montana sky, surrounded by the peaceful sounds of two peoples learning to trust each other, Catherine realized that her quiet life by Willow Creek had ended the moment she chose to save a dying stranger. But what was beginning in its place promised to be far more challenging, rewarding, and transformative than anything she had ever imagined possible. Dawn broke over Catherine's homestead with a clarity that seemed to promise new beginnings. As the first golden rays of sunlight touched the valley, Catherine stood at her bedroom window, watching the Arapaho camp come to life with the efficient movements of a people accustomed to living in harmony with natural rhythms. Smoke rose from carefully tended fires, horses were led to water, and the quiet murmur of conversation in an ancient language created a soundtrack she was beginning to find comforting rather than foreign. Today would bring her decision. Chief Windwalker had made it clear that while there was no pressure to choose immediately, practical considerations required an answer soon. The northern Arapaho needed to return to their people, and if Catherine was to join them, preparations would need to be made for her integration into tribal life. A soft knock at her door interrupted her contemplation. "Catherine?" It was Singing Bird's voice, warm and respectful. "May I come in?" Catherine opened the door to find Standing Wolf's sister carrying a bundle wrapped in soft deerskin. Singing Bird was a woman of perhaps 30 years, with intelligent eyes and the kind of serene confidence that spoke of someone secure in her place in the world. "I brought you something," Singing Bird said, entering the room with Catherine's permission. "Whether you choose to join our people or not, you should have this." She unwrapped the bundle to reveal a dress of extraordinary beauty. The soft buckskin had been decorated with intricate beadwork and patterns that seemed to tell a story, and eagle feathers adorned the sleeves in a way that spoke of both artistry and spiritual significance. "It's magnificent," Catherine breathed, touching the delicate beadwork with reverent fingers. "It belonged to my grandmother," Singing Bird explained. "She was known for her courage and wisdom, qualities that my father and brother see in you." The dress was made for someone who had proven worthy of respect among our people. Catherine felt overwhelmed by the honor being shown to her. "I couldn't accept something so precious." Singing Bird smiled. "You already have, simply by being who you are. The dress recognizes the person, not the other way around." She paused, studying Catherine's face carefully. "My brother loves you, you know, not just from gratitude, but truly love. I see it in how he speaks of you, how his eyes follow you, how he has changed since knowing you." Catherine felt her cheeks warm. "And I love him. But Singing Bird, I'm frightened by what accepting your father's offer would mean. I don't know if I'm strong enough to be the wife of a future chief." Singing Bird settled onto the bed beside Catherine, her manner becoming sisterly and intimate. "Can I tell you a secret? Every woman who marries into leadership is frightened. Do you think I wasn't terrified when I married Red Hawk, the war leader of our southern band? Do you think Gentle Rain didn't have doubts when she accepted running Bear's proposal? But you were raised in this life. You understood the expectations and responsibilities. Understanding and being ready are two different things," Singing Bird said gently. "Leadership is not something you master before you accept it. It's something you grow into by accepting it and learning from your mistakes." Catherine considered. This, finding comfort in Singing Bird's practical wisdom. Besides, Singing Bird continued with a mischievous smile, you've already proven you can handle the most difficult part. What's that? Managing my stubborn brother when he's injured and insisting he doesn't need help. Catherine laughed, remembering Standing Wolf's initial reluctance to accept her care. He is rather independent. All the men in our family are. But they're also loyal, honorable, and devoted to their families. Standing Wolf will be a good husband and a wise chief, especially with the right woman beside him to keep him grounded. Their conversation was interrupted by voices from outside. Chief Windwalker calling for a gathering of the entire group. Catherine felt her stomach flutter with nervousness, understanding that decision time had arrived. Whatever you choose, Singing Bird said, rising from the bed, you should wear the dress today. It will help you feel the strength of the women. Who came before you? Catherine nodded, touched by the gesture and the wisdom behind it. As Singing Bird left to join the gathering, Catherine carefully changed into the ceremonial dress, marveling at how perfectly it fit and how wearing it seemed to imbue her with a sense of connection to something larger than herself. When she emerged from the house, Catherine found the entire group assembled in a large circle near the creek. Chief Windwalker stood at the center, his ceremonial regalia marking the formality of the occasion. Standing Wolf was positioned to his father's right, and Catherine could see the hope and anxiety mingled in his expression as he watched her. Approach. Marcus Brennan and his men stood respectfully at the edge of the gathering, clearly honored to witness what they understood to be a significant cultural ceremony. Catherine Mitchell, Chief Windwalker, began, his voice carrying clearly in the still morning air. You have shown our people a kindness that transcends the boundaries between our worlds. You risked your life to save my son, and in doing so, you prevented a war that would have brought suffering to many innocent people. Catherine felt the weight of every gaze upon her as the chief continued. But more than your courage in battle, you have shown us something precious, that understanding and cooperation between our peoples is possible when individuals choose to see each other as human beings rather than enemies. Chief Windwalker gestured toward the assembled warriors and their families. Each person here has been touched by your actions. My son lives because of your mercy. Our people remain at peace because of your wisdom in ensuring we learn the truth. Your neighbors, he nodded toward where Henrik and Tommy Larson had arrived to witness the ceremony, have seen that cooperation between different peoples can bring strength rather than conflict. Catherine noticed that word of the ceremony had spread, drawing not just the Larsons but several other neighboring families who had ridden out to witness this unprecedented gathering. So today, the chief continued, we offer you not just adoption into our tribe, but the opportunity to become a bridge between our worlds. As the wife of our future chief, you would help guide decisions that affect not just our people, but all who share these lands. Catherine felt the magnitude of what was being offered, not just marriage and a new life, but a role in shaping the future relationship between white settlers and the Arapaho people. Standing Wolf stepped forward, his voice strong and clear. Catherine, I offer you my heart, my protection, and my partnership in building a future where our children can grow up in a world of peace rather than conflict. Catherine looked around the circle of faces, Arapaho and white alike, and saw hope reflected in every expression. These people weren't just witnessing a personal decision. They were hoping for a symbol that different peoples could find common ground. But as Catherine prepared to speak, she realized that her answer couldn't be based on the weight of their expectations or the political significance of her choice. It had to be based on what she truly wanted for her own life. Chief Windwalker, she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Standing Wolf, honored members of the Northern Arapaho people, I am deeply moved by the trust you've shown me and the honor you've offered. She paused, looking directly at Standing Wolf and seeing the love and hope shining in his dark eyes. "I accept your proposal," she said simply. "Not because of obligation or political necessity, but because I believe we can build something beautiful. Together, I choose to join my life to yours and to become part of your people." The reaction was immediate and joyful. Arapaho voices rose in celebratory calls, while the white neighbors clapped and cheered. Standing Wolf's smile was radiant as he stepped forward to take Catherine's hands in his. "Then let us begin the ceremony that will make you truly one of U.S." Chief Windwalker declared. What followed was a blend of Arapaho tradition and improvised ritual that honored both Catherine's heritage and her new identity. Singing Bird presented her with a new name, Brave Heart Woman, while Running Bear offered her a place in the tribal council. The ceremony concluded with Standing Wolf placing a magnificent necklace around Catherine's neck, its intricate beadwork marking her as the wife of a future chief. As the formal ceremony gave way to celebration, Catherine found herself surrounded by well-wishers from both communities. Henrik Larsson approached with tears in his eyes. "Your father would be so proud," he said, embracing her gently. "You've brought honor to his memory and hope to all of us." Marcus Brennan shook her hand with genuine warmth. "You've done something remarkable here, Catherine. This alliance could change everything about how our peoples relate to each other." But it was the quiet conversation she had later with Chief Windwalker that touched her most deeply. "You have given my son something precious," the chief said as they walked together along the creek where Catherine had first found Standing Wolf. "Not just your love, but a vision of what leadership can be when it's based on understanding rather than fear." Catherine looked at the clear water flowing past, remembering that desperate morning when she had pulled a dying stranger from these same waters. "Chief Windwalker," she said, "I need you to know that I understand the responsibility I'm accepting. I promise to do everything in my power to be worthy of the trust your people have placed in me." The chief smiled, his weathered face reflecting approval and affection. "You already are worthy, daughter. You proved that the moment you chose compassion over caution." As the sun set over the valley, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Catherine stood with the Standing Wolf at the edge of their gathering, watching their two people share food, stories, and laughter around common fires. "No regrets?" Standing Wolf asked softly. Catherine leaned against his strong shoulder, feeling perfectly at peace with her choice. "None at all. I think this is exactly what I was meant to do with my life." Standing Wolf wrapped his arms around her, holding her close as they watched the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. "Together, we'll build something that honors both our peoples and creates hope for the generations to come." Catherine smiled, understanding that her simple act of mercy beside Willow Creek had led to something far greater than she had ever imagined. She had found not just love, but purpose, a chance to use her life in service of something larger than herself. The story that had begun with a dying stranger and a woman's compassionate heart would continue through generations, as their children and grandchildren grew up in a world where understanding had triumphed over fear, where different peoples had learned to see each other as family rather than enemies. Catherine Mitchell had saved one man's life beside a creek. But in doing so, she had discovered something profound about the power of individual choices to reshape entire worlds. Her courage had not just prevented a war, it had planted seeds of peace that would bloom for generations to come. And sometimes, that's exactly how the world changes. One act of courage, one moment of compassion, one person willing to choose love over fear. The quiet homestead by Willow Creek had witnessed the beginning of something beautiful, a reminder that the most important battles are often won not through violence, but through the simple decision to extend mercy to those who need it most. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.